It was supposed to be a casual weekend. A few college friends, a rented cabin in the woods, and a lot of catching up over cheap wine and old stories. Nothing fancy, just nostalgia served warm by a fireplace. I hadn't planned on seeing Eli again. He wasn't in the group chat, hadn't been in years. But there he was, leaning against the kitchen counter like he hadn't aged a day, holding a bottle of red wine like a damn movie prop. He looked exactly the same, those wide, mischievous eyes, the easy smile that made you feel like you were part of some inside joke, even when you weren't. And when he saw me, he lit up like I was the one he'd come for. "Noah," he said, arms opening like he was waiting for a hug. "You're actually here." I managed a half smile. "You too. Didn't think you'd make it." He pulled me in. His hug was warm and a little too long, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. I remembered how his dorm room always smelled faintly like sandalwood and fabric softener. Somehow he still did. "Guess fate wanted a reunion," he said into my shoulder. Fate, or some drunk friend who didn't tell me Eli had RSVP'd. I looked over at Jamie and shot her a glare. She just grinned and raised her glass. The rest of the evening blurred into background noise. The chatter, the card games, the half-hearted attempts at cooking dinner. But Eli was sharp in my peripheral vision all night, laughing too loud, teasing too much, catching my eyes across the room like we were the only two people who remembered something no one else did. And maybe we did. Back in college, we were roommates for 2 years. Late-night pizza runs, movie marathons, deep talks that drifted into silence. There was always something almost between us. Almost a touch, almost a kiss, almost something real, but never quite. I remember one night I fell asleep on his bed after a long study session. I woke up at 3 a.m. with his arm around me, his breath warm on my neck. He didn't move, and neither did I. In the morning, we pretended it didn't happen. Now, years later, in this cozy cabin filled with old friends and old ghosts, I felt that almost again, but louder. At midnight, people started claiming rooms. It was first come, first serve, and I wasn't fast enough. When I walked into the last open room, Eli was already unpacking on one of the twin beds. He looked up. "Looks like we're bunking together, just like old times." My heart sank and fluttered at the same time. "Great," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He sat on the edge of the bed, that familiar tilt to his grin. "Unless you'd rather swap with someone?" I shook my head. "No, it's fine." He patted the other bed. "Then welcome to the coziest room in the house." I dropped my bag by the door, forcing a casual tone. "Just don't steal the blanket again." Eli laughed, that full, open laugh that made something twist in my chest. "No promises." That night, as I lay in bed listening to the creak of the house settling in Eli's slow, even breathing, I couldn't help but wonder, was this finally going to be a reunion or just another almost? College feels like a half-developed photo now, a little blurry at the edges, but some parts shine with too much clarity. Especially him. Eli moved into our dorm late in sophomore year, after my original roommate transferred out. I remember watching him drop his duffel bag on the floor, headphones still in, eyes scanning the room like it was a challenge. His smile was instant and disarming. "Cool if I take the bed by the window?" he asked, like he already knew I'd say yes. I did. He unpacked with the confidence of someone who didn't worry about making space. He was the space. Posters, Polaroids, old concert tickets taped the wall. Within a day, our sterile little room looked lived in. By week 2, we'd synced like we'd known each other for years. I learned Eli hummed when he brushed his teeth, that he kept peanut M&Ms hidden in a sock drawer, that his laugh, loud and reckless, could break through even my worst days. He also had this habit of talking late into the night. Lights off, our beds 6 feet apart, voices soft and slow. One night, sometime around 2 a.m., I asked, "Do you think you're in love with anyone right now?" He paused, like I'd pressed a bruise. "No. You?" "No," I said too quickly. The silence that followed was thick, not uncomfortable, just full. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted. "Like, what if I'm not into girls the way I thought I was?" My breath caught. I kept still, not even blinking in the dark. "Yeah." He let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, Don't know what that means, though. I didn't say anything back. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I was terrified I'd say too much or not enough. We never spoke of it again. But after that night, something shifted. Touches lingered longer. Jokes dipped into the suggestive. His eyes would find mine across crowded rooms and hold there, like he was waiting for a signal I didn't know how to give. And then there was that night. It was pouring rain, and we were soaked from walking home after a party. I'd had just enough beer to be warm and brave. Eli pulled his shirt over his head, tossing on the floor, and I caught myself staring. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly he walked over. Close, too close. His breath was sweet with whiskey and wet air. For a second, I thought, this is it. His hand brushed mine. He leaned in, eyes searching, hesitant, and then someone knocked on our door. Just like that, the moment passed. Again, we laughed it off. We always laughed it off. But I never forgot how close his face had been to mine, or how much it hurt to pull away from something that never even began. The air in the room felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the heater struggling against the cold mountain air, or maybe it was the fact that I was lying 10 feet away from Eli, again, pretending this was just normal. He was on the opposite twin bed, scrolling through his phone, blanket kicked halfway off. He looked the same and different all at once, broader now, older in a way that was more refined than aged. The boyish mischief still played in his eyes, but now it was paired with something slower, quieter, something intentional. You still snore? I asked, staring at the ceiling. He laughed. You still talk in your sleep? I do not. Oh, you do. I used to write down your weird dreams. One night, you mumbled something about marrying a ghost librarian. I groaned, pulling the blanket over my face. Please tell me you burned that notebook. Nope. Probably in a box somewhere. Might be worth publishing. I peeked over at him. His eyes were already on me. There was that pause again, the stretch of silence between a look and a word. I'd memorized that silence back in college. It was always right before he almost said something he couldn't say. You cold? He asked, nodding toward the open window behind me. I shrugged. I'm fine. He sat up anyway, crossed the room, and closed it barely a foot from where I was lying. I felt his presence before I saw him. The soft scent of cedar and something faintly citrus clung to him, and I suddenly forgot how to stay still. You're always cold, he murmured, adjusting the blanket around my shoulders. His fingers brushed the side of my arm. Slow, deliberate. Thanks, I said, my voice much quieter than I meant. He didn't move right away, just stood there, looking down at me like he was weighing something. Then he sat on the edge of my bed. My pulse quickened. He tapped his fingers on his knee. You ever think about the old dorm? I let out a dry laugh. All the time. He looked at me, but this time his smile didn't reach his eyes. Me too. The quiet stretched again. Not awkward, just thick with possibility. Eli, I started, unsure of what I was even going to say, but then he said, I used to lie awake and wonder if I should have kissed you that night. I froze. He laughed softly, nervously. That's weird to say now, huh? I swallowed. No, not weird. He looked up at me then, really looked. So, why didn't we? I blinked. Fear. He nodded. Same. A beat passed. I'm not scared now, he added, voice lower. The room buzzed with electricity. No movement, just tension. I couldn't tell if I wanted to pull him closer or bolt from the room. Then casually he stood and walked back to his bed. Night, Noah, he said, lying down. I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember how breathing worked. Night, I whispered, and then, minutes later, or maybe hours, I felt it. The dip of his bed springs, the rustle of blankets, footsteps, then his voice close to my ear, can't sleep. I rolled onto my side. He was crouched beside my bed. What if I stayed here? He asked, voice barely audible. Just for a bit. My heart pounded. I could barely nod, but I did. He climbed in behind me, careful and slow, his body warm against my back. We lay there in silence. His breath tickled the nape of my neck. His hand hovered at my waist, then stilled, just resting there. Nothing else. Not yet. But I knew. Something was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be an almost. I don't know how long we lay there. I only knew I hadn't moved, hadn't dared to. Eli's chest rose and fell behind me, steady, calm, and impossibly close. I could feel the heat of him through the thin fabric of my t-shirt. Every inch of my skin buzzed. His hand hadn't moved. It rested lightly at my waist, fingers curled slightly, like he was waiting for me to flinch, to pull away, to break the spell. But I didn't. I couldn't. I heard him breathe in, slow and deep, and then, gently, his hand slid. Not fast, not aggressive, just slow, careful, like he was moving through fog, trying to feel the shape of something invisible. His fingers brushed over the hem of my shirt, then slid underneath. The warmth of his skin on mine lit up nerves I hadn't felt in years. He stopped at my stomach, his hand flat and still. I couldn't believe where it stopped, because it wasn't rushed. It wasn't crude. It was reverent. Like he wasn't touching me for himself. He was touching me to see if I'd let him stay. "Is this okay?" he whispered against the back of my neck. I nodded. But that wasn't enough. "Yeah," I said, my voice a little too quiet. "It's okay." I felt him exhale, not relief, not triumph. Something softer. Maybe something scared. "I used to imagine this," he admitted, words brushing my skin. "Just being close to you like this." I turned slightly, just enough to see him over my shoulder. Our faces were inches apart. His eyes searched mine, cautious but open. He looked like he was waiting for me to disappear. "I did too," I whispered. "A lot." That was all it took. He leaned in, slower than I thought possible, giving me 1,000 chances to stop him. I didn't. Our lips met softly. Not a crash, not hunger, just the tentative first press of two people who'd spent years not saying what they felt. The kiss was warm, exploratory, his hand still at my waist like an anchor. And then I kissed him back. That changed everything. He deepened the kiss, his hand gliding up to my chest, fingers splayed over my heartbeat like he needed to feel how fast it was racing. I moved onto my back, pulling him with me. Our legs tangled. The years of silence between us evaporated in the heat. When he pulled away to look at me, his expression wasn't smug. It was raw. "I didn't think I'd ever get to do that," he said, quietly. "You could have," I breathed. "Back then." He traced my jaw with his thumb. "I was scared I'd ruin us." "You still might," I said, managing a nervous laugh. He smiled, that wide, crooked grin I'd fallen for a long time ago. "Worth the risk." We kissed again, slower now, unhurried and deep. His hand found mine, fingers lacing like it was the most natural thing in the world. I squeezed his hand and he squeezed back. Time blurred after that. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. He slid his hand down again, over my chest, along my ribs, down to the waistband of my boxers. And this time, when he paused, I placed my hand over his. Yes, that one word didn't even have to be said out loud. It was in the way I looked at him, the way I didn't stop him. We took our time. There was nothing performative about it. No pressure to turn it into something perfect. We just discovered each other. His lips found the soft skin under my jaw. My hand slid over the planes of his back, the curve of his hip. Every breath was a confession. Every touch was permission. And when it finally happened, when everything almost finally became now, we didn't speak. We just held each other. It wasn't just physical. It wasn't about need or release. It was about being seen. When we finally collapsed into each other, tangled and breathless, I couldn't stop staring at him. The way his hair was mussed, the way his chest still rose and fell in rhythm with mine. "You okay?" he asked, thumb tracing lazy circles on my arm. "I think I'm more than okay." He smiled. "Good." There was a pause, the kind that used to scare me. Now it felt like silence finally had space to breathe. "I want this," I said, almost before I realized I'd said it. His eyes met mine. "Me too." We lay there, skin against skin, our past curled up between us like a worn-in blanket. And I realized it wasn't just about where his hand had stopped. It was about everything that hand meant: trust, honesty, choice. It was about finally letting someone stay. The sun had the nerve to rise like nothing had changed. A soft, golden beam crept through the half-closed blinds, casting slatted shadows across the floor. Birds were starting up outside, chirping like they hadn't missed anything. But everything was different. I was still in bed, with Eli. His arm was draped lazily across my stomach, one leg tangled with mine, his face buried half in the pillow, half against my shoulder. His breath warmed my skin with every exhale. He looked peaceful. I didn't know how to feel. Not because I regretted anything, I didn't, but because I wasn't used to the absence of doubt. I kept waiting for panic to creep in, for that post-mistake guilt that used to follow every drunken kiss or failed, almost. But it wasn't there. Instead, there was a quiet, a stillness that felt earned. Eli stirred slightly, his thumb brushing a slow circle over my hip. "Are you awake?" he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. "Yeah," I said, my voice low and warm. He blinked up at me, eyes soft, hair mess. "Hey! Hey!" We both smiled, stupid and shy. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Just looked at me like he was still making sure I was real. "That wasn't weird, right?" he asked, voice tentative. I shook my head. "No, it wasn't weird." "Good," he said, resting his forehead against my chest, "because it didn't feel like a mistake. It wasn't." Silence again, the good kind. "I've thought about this," I said quietly, "more times than I can count." He looked up. Yeah, but I always thought you'd moved on, or figured it out with someone else, or just forgot about me." He shook his head slowly. "I never forgot." His voice cracked just a little, and that was when I realized I wasn't the only one who'd carried this. I didn't know how to reach out. He added, "I was scared you'd shut me down, or that it was all in my head." I squeezed his hand. "It wasn't." He laughed softly. "Took us long enough." I smiled, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "We're a little slow." "But dramatic," he grinned. "Always have been." Outside the room, someone banged a cupboard shut. Voices floated in, friends waking up, coffee brewing, the world pulling us back in. But I didn't want to move. Not yet. Eli looked at me, eyes suddenly serious. "Is this just a weekend thing?" My chest tightened. "Do you want it to be?" He shook his head, instantly. "No, I don't." I swallowed. "Then let's not pretend it is." He leaned in and kissed me soft and certain. "Okay," he said, forehead resting against mine. "No pretending." And in the morning light, for the first time, we weren't almost anymore. The car was quiet, but not in a heavy way. More like the kind of quiet that hums when something important has already been said. Eli was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other resting between us on the console. His pinky kept brushing mine, a touch so small I might have missed it if I hadn't been paying attention to every tiny thing he did. We were 2 hours into the ride back to the city. The trees blurred past the windows, still golden from the weekend sun. Our bags were in the back, and in the front seat sat whatever we were now. He glanced at me. "You're quiet." I smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "Good thoughts or overthinking thoughts?" "Both." He reached over and hooked our pinkies, locking them. "Start with the good ones." I took a breath. This weekend felt like something we should have had years ago. "It did," he said, nodding. "But maybe we needed the time to grow up, to stop being afraid of ruining something we were already pretending wasn't there." I looked out the window, trying not to get too caught up in how calm his voice was. How right this felt. "I don't want to pretend anymore," I said, finally. "Then don't." I turned to face him fully. "What about when we get back? What are we to everyone else?" He gave a small laugh. "I don't care. Not anymore." "You?" I shook my head. "I'm done with almosts." He looked at me, really looked, and the corner of his mouth lifted. "Good." A comfortable silence settled between us again. The kind that said, "We're okay now." And then, softly, he added, "I want to do the boring stuff with you." I blinked. "What?" He laughed, a little sheepishly. "Like grocery shopping. Fighting over which Netflix show to rewatch. Waking up next to you without it being a surprise." I felt something in my chest unravel in the best way. I want all of that too, I said, even the arguments about pineapple on pizza. He grinned. Still a crime. We'll work on it. He squeezed my hand. We'll work on everything. The city skyline finally came into view, glittering in the late afternoon sun. It felt different this time. Not cold, not lonely, like it was waiting for us. And I realized the thing I'd been waiting for all those years, it was never the perfect moment or the right time. It was just Eli willing to reach across the space between us and stay there. No more silences filled with almosts. No more nights wondering what if. Just this, him and me. Home. I used to picture him walking out of my life 100 different ways. A slammed door, a missed call, a final text that never got answered. But I never pictured this. Him in my kitchen, barefoot and humming, wearing one of my old college t-shirts, as if we hadn't lost years pretending we were nothing more than friends. I leaned against the doorway, coffee warming my hands, just watching him move like he belonged there. Because he did. And I couldn't believe it. Not because I hadn't hoped I had more times than I'd admit out loud, but because somewhere deep down, I'd convinced myself that stories like ours stayed unfinished, tucked in the corners of old notebooks and what-ifs. Never spoken, never real. But here he was. Here we were. And when he looked up, when he caught me staring like I still wasn't used to waking up with him beside me, he smiled. That same crooked grin. The one that ruined me the first time and rebuilt me now. Why are you looking at me like that? He asked, voice still a little hoarse from sleep. I shrugged, just making sure this isn't a dream. He crossed the room, slid his arms around my waist, and rested his forehead against mine. It's not, he whispered, but I'll keep proving it if you need me to. I laughed, quiet and full. I might. His kiss was gentle, familiar, and I let myself believe it this time, because his hand had slid down, not in lust, not in hesitation, but in something deeper, something we'd both waited for, something we could finally name, love. No more maybe, no more almost, no more waiting, just this, here, now. And I still couldn't believe it. But this time, I didn't have to.